Hi, Jeff Bridgman here of York County, Pennsylvania, owner of Jeff R. Bridgman American Antiques. I've come to you tonight to show you this super rare and interesting antique American flag with 32 stars and an eagle in the canton. Now, there are two types of flags. There are sewn flags with stars individually sewn on and stripes pieced together by stitching in a traditional fashion, and there are parade flags which are printed on cotton or silk or sometimes on wool and tacked to a staff waved at parades and political events. They're sort of apples and oranges in a way because sewn flags tend to be 8 feet long and larger. A 6-footer was considered small in the 19th century. Flags needed to be big to be effective as signals. Parade flags were decorative and they could be small. Typically, they're anywhere from 3 inches, say, to 3 feet. Sometimes there are larger ones. Sometimes there are smaller sewn flags. But generally speaking, they don't really overlap. That is, you won't see the same flag in a printed form that you will see in a sewn form. It just often really doesn't happen. So this is a parade flag. Now, the earliest parade flags known in America dated sometime between 1837 and 1845, with 26 stars, the full star count of the time, or 13 stars, but made within that same period to reflect the original 13 colonies. It was popular throughout American history to make 13-star flags. Now, some of these early star counts are basically unknown in printed flags, or have been for many years. 32 was one of them. In fact, there are only 2 known printed parade flags with 32 stars. This is one of them. So this is a really interesting flag. It's got an eagle in the center, a federal eagle. Now, was that an official American flag? And really, anything went in the 19th century. It became popular to put flags, eagles on flags as early as the 18th century. The federal seal had an eagle on it, and you just start to see that almost immediately placed upon stars and stripes. But it exists more in illustrations of early flags than it does in actual, in the cloth, if you will, examples. So this has a federal eagle in the middle with 13 stars and over a shield with 13 red and white stripes. It then has a single wreath, which is really rare in any sort of flag with more than 13 stars. A single wreath of stars here, and then a star in each corner. I'll show you this a little closer so you can really see it, but I'm just explaining the basics here. Now, there are 2 more stars beneath the eagle, and these are smaller than the rest. Let me bring you in and show you. Now, here you see this ring of 26 stars that I spoke of around the center. And if you look closely, you'll see that the arms, it's almost like somebody grabbed the 2 lower arms of each star and pulled them towards the center of the flag so that you have these very folky, misshapen, interesting stars that are so close together up above that they almost touch. They're almost like they're holding hands or something. Maybe this design was originally dreamt up with 26 stars, and it was one of the earliest designs. That's very possible. It's possible that these 4 stars, because they're larger and different than the rest, may have been added later to an earlier print block. That is, the stars would have been in relief on the block with the rest of it carved. These were parade flags, especially cotton ones like this in the mid-19th century, were block printed. So there would be a block carved in relief for the stars in any areas that would be white. And you would just make 4 more carvings within the block to achieve this. Now, that's not necessarily what happened here, but it's a guess. And these 2 little guys, these are separate from what's here in the shield. A federal shield with 13 stars and 13 stripes is typical. You'll see other things, but that's traditional throughout history. And here with these 2 stars underneath are definitely purposeful and part of the full count. They appear beneath the tail of the eagle, rather almost within it, as you see the tail feathers coming down here, and beneath the gripped olive branches and arrows, which are very difficult to see. But it is a very beautiful bird, as you can tell. And there's only one other flag that I know of that's very closely related. It has 34 stars. It may be that this flag maker made flags in every count from 26 to 34 at least. It's just almost no others are known. Now, flags with eagles in their canton as the primary image are rare in both printed flags and in sewn flags. In sewn flags, there are more that survive than in printed flags. In printed flags, I can think of 12 that, off the top of my head, that survive across all star counts in early American flags. Just 12. I may be missing 1 or 2, but I'm close. There certainly aren't 20. There probably aren't 15. I can think of 12. And I'm more married to knowing than probably anybody when it comes to printed flags. I love parade flags. I've owned most of those examples. Not all of them, but most. Now, we have to take a look at the star count here because that's really important. When was this flag made? Well, this one has an interesting story because of those 2 stars. Now, if they represent 2 states that were already in, then they would represent the period when Minnesota was the most recent state to join the Union. So Minnesota became the 32nd state on May 11th of 1858. It was about 8 or 9 months until it was followed by Oregon. I think that was actually on Valentine's Day of 1859. And at that point, production would have ceased. It remained official till July 4th of that year, but nobody cared what was official. And production of 32-star flags would have ended at that time, if not beforehand, in anticipation of the addition of Oregon. So otherwise, what does it mean? Well, if you remove those 2 little stars, you have 30, right? Wisconsin joined the Union as the 30th state on May 29th of 1848, 10 years before Minnesota. It was followed by California in 1850. So if these 2 little stars are territories, then this flag would have been made between 1848 and 1850. The 2 little stars might represent California and then Minnesota, or they might represent Kansas and Nebraska. That's a possibility, and there are others. You kind of have to understand what was going on in America at the time. This was the antebellum, and slavery and related issues were really coming to a head because the South was out of land. Why? Because of the Missouri Compromise. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 allowed for the addition of Alabama as the 22nd state and Maine as the 23rd, a slave state and a free state, in order to keep the balance. And then states would come in pairs afterwards, a slave in a free state, and a slave in a free state, and so on. It also allowed for Missouri to come in as a slave state, but it would be the last one that could come in above the 36-degree, 30-minute parallel. So it put a limit on the amount of land that was available to be slave states. And in the 1840s, some of that started to fall apart because we got Florida in 1845 and Texas in 1845, two slave states. They were followed pretty shortly thereafter by Iowa in 1846 and Wisconsin in 1848. But things were really coming to a peak in terms of issues. Now in 1850, we had something called the Compromise of 1850, which put borders on Texas so it couldn't engulf more territory than it should have. It was trying to claim all sorts of land that it never controlled, that was purchased by the U.S. as part of all after the Mexican War. And so it put borders on there, but it also allowed California to come in as a free state. And it allowed any incoming Western territories from then on to vote on slavery. So the residents, that was part of the compromise, so the residents could vote on slavery. This caused a bit of a backlash because in 1854 we had the Kansas Nebraska Act. What did that do? It was another extension of the same thing. It allowed states to come in above the this 36-30 parallel that were as slave states if they voted on it. So it allowed those territories to vote on slavery. And when you hear of bloody Kansas, you know, we think we bust people in for elections today. You think that they're doing that to add votes to a certain party. Well, the same thing happened in Kansas. That as many people as could possibly get into Kansas were brought in to vote to make it either a slave or a free state, and that that resulted in all sorts of anger and feuds and killing and all sorts of things. You wouldn't believe what happened even on the floor of Congress. There were fist fights on the floor of Congress. There were guns drawn on the floor of Congress. This is stuff we forget about and rarely think about. But that was a big deal because the South was out of land. So why 2 stars? Probably a slave state and a free state. Were there rumors of the Kansas Nebraska Act? Is that what they mean? It's hard to know. But probably they reflect a slave and a free state coming into the Union. Whatever the case may be, this is an extraordinarily rare thing to see, with sort of a dual Wisconsin-Minnesota relationship, and the only one of its kind, and one of only two 2-star flags that exist. The other one is actually a campaign flag with overprinted text for the campaign of Stephen Douglas, who brokered both of those deals, both the Compromise of 1850 and the Kansas Nebraska Act. That's just by happen chance, I think. I don't know if anybody made a 32-star flag for any reason to be used for that campaign, but it is the only other one that exists. It's a little flag, about 6 by 8 inches long, in a museum collection, and misidentified by the way, as a 34-star flag. I discovered the star count as just sort of I was looking for star counts in any early political flags to see what existed, because sometimes they don't line up with the year of the election, and you can find some interesting things. So I just stumbled upon it while researching Lincoln flags and flags with unusual star counts. And I counted the stars on the thing, and that's how I found a 32-star flag in a museum collection, looking at images of everything I could possibly find from the 1850s. So that's the only other one. And flags with eagles, one of 12, 13, or 14. This is an incredible thing for any collection. And thanks for coming to listen to me today to talk a little bit about this wonderful early American flag. Take care.